Welcome to A Deeper Dive. This podcast is an extension of our Sunday sermons, a place where we slow down, ask better questions, and talk through God's Word together. Each episode, we'll revisit ideas from Sunday and spend time on the parts we didn't get to fully unpack. Whether you're listening on your commute, at home, or in a quiet moment, our prayer is that this conversation helps you grow in understanding and faith. Thanks for being here. Let's take a deeper dive.
Well, welcome back to another episode, Jay. Always a joy to jump back in with you.
Yes, excited to look at some more Genesis 16 today after our time yesterday in worship together.
Yes, very good. So we're building off of Genesis 15, some of the previous storyline. How do we see Genesis 16 and 21 fit within the larger Abraham story?
Mm-hmm. So Genesis 16 comes as obviously right off the heels of what we looked at last week with God's clarification to Abraham, the covenant clarification that his offspring, the heir of his house, and the heir of the promises would come through him.
Yep.
So it's a easy connection there because Sarah had not borne children to Abraham. That's how the chapter begins.
Yeah.
And so therefore, this chapter is, like I said yesterday, showing how they try to help God a little bit with his plans. Yeah. And then it bridges really well to this coming Sundays so it's like 3 chapters right here in the middle. So if we go big context, 13 and 14, Lot is out of the picture.
Right.
Chapter 15, Eliezer's out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So then chapter 16, they try to do their own plan.
Yeah. And
then chapter 17, we're going to find out that it's not only the offspring's not just coming from Abraham, but also from Sarah.
Yeah.
So we got one more week of this theme of the offspring continuing to roll.
Okay. Well, that makes sense, and I guess that kind of rolls into our first question. So to read, starting in verse 2. Okay. And Sarah said to Abraham, "Behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant, it may be that I shall obtain children by her." Mm-hmm. So it wasn't previously stated that the promise would be fulfilled also through Sarah.
No.
So when I was reading through this earlier, I was thinking, well, that's just her putting it on, but she's trying to seek clarification too. Then of like what do we see her motivation?
Yeah.
Her motivation behind that beginning.
No. So there's 2 things going on here. So in 15, God tells Abraham. Let me see if I can just look at the verse real quick. Verse 4 of chapter 15. God tells Abraham, "Your very own son shall be your heir."
Yeah.
That's all we know. It's coming from Abraham. Oh, okay. So then what Sarah does is she adopts a cultural practice, like I talked about yesterday. This would have been accepted in the ancient world because motherhood was so important, that her maidservant would have slept with Abraham, and then her son would have been considered like Sarah's son.
Right.
So this would have fulfilled the promise of 15 that your very own son will be your heir.
Yep.
But then next week we're going to see, no, God's got more specificity coming, and that is it's going to be Sarah's son as well.
Right.
So that's that.
Okay.
But the motive could be 2 things. One is the route I took, and the route the context seems to point us to is that they understood God's plan, but they were trying to help him along.
Yeah. Another
Another wrinkle in that is it could have just been that Sarah really wanted a child because of the cultural status of having children in the ancient world, which we see reflected all through the Bible.
Right.
Every woman we meet in the Old Testament that's bearing is just crying out to God for children.
Yeah.
And when there's a rival wife, which never works out well.
Yep.
You think of the case of Hannah and Peninnah in 1 Samuel. There's oftentimes provoking.
Yep.
Or Rachel and Leah.
I'll say Rachel and Leah.
Yeah.
We'll see
Genesis.
soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they could have been either of those options as to one. One is more wanting to do God's plan. The other is more just, I want to have a kid.
Yeah. So. Okay. So I'm going to read 2 through 3 again. Okay. So Sarah said to Abraham, "Behold, now the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Go into my servant. It may be that I shall obtain children by her." And Abraham listened to the voice of Sarah. So I'll skip through 3.
Okay.
Until, Abraham's wife. Oh, shoot. Never mind.
Yeah, I think you want to read 3.
I do want to read 3.
Yeah.
So after Abraham had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, and gave her to Abraham, her husband, as a wife. So he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, she looked with contempt on her mistress. Specifically in the earlier portions of those two verses. That's a pattern that we've seen before.
Correct.
And where have we seen that?
Yeah, so there's a few references in this passage to Genesis chapter 3. In fact, in verses 2 and 3, you read them both. So if we go to verse 2, it says, it ends by saying, and Abraham listened to the voice of Sarai.
Yep.
If you go back to Genesis chapter 3, verse 17, when God is rebuking or giving out the punishments to Adam,
right?
He says, because you've listened to the voice of your wife and eaten from the tree which I commanded you, and then he repeats the quote. So this alerts us to Abraham is falling into the same trap Adam did. In other words, he's listening to the voice of his wife when she's leading him astray.
Yep.
And then in verse 3, there's another reference, and that's where it says Sarai took Hagar and gave her to Abraham, her husband. So in Genesis 3:6, when Eve takes of the fruit, it says she took of the fruit, she ate, and then she gave some to her husband who was with her.
Right.
So again, same kind of phrase there. So what happens a lot in Genesis is the actions of the characters are portrayed in language of Genesis 3
right,
to help us better judge that action.
Okay.
So even though this is Sarah's idea, by alluding back to Genesis 3, Abraham is still faulted for going along with Sarah here.
Right. So it's not explicitly, like we don't have an explicit, they did this and it was wrong. But by the language, and we'll see it repeated later on in Genesis through the rest of the Old Testament as well, when that specific kind of sequence of see, take, I mean, it's that same deal.
Yep.
That is our negative connotation. It kind of just implies they did this of their own will and outside of God's.
That's right. You know, we've seen that, we saw it with the sons of God in chapter 6.
Right.
We saw it with Lot in chapter 13 when he looked to the land and saw that it was, well watered, and he chose for himself.
Yep.
That's Genesis 6. And then now we see it here with Abraham, with Sarah, and then Abraham listening to her in verse 2.
Yeah. And
now the irony
we'll
is,
see it either.
The irony is we went to 21 yesterday as well. In chapter 21, this is actually reversed because Abraham doesn't want to send Ishmael and Hagar away in chapter 21, and God looks at him and says, "Listen to your wife." So just to clarify for all the married couples, it's not always wrong to listen to the voice of your wife.
It's not implied that the counsel of your wife is incorrect, but just in these cases, it was following after their own will rather than letting God's will play out.
That's right. That's right. But in chapter 21, Sarah was right.
Okay, so for us, when are we, like, what are ways that it's easy for us to take, to try to accomplish God's purposes in our own life, and how do we catch ourselves in that?
Yeah. No, it's great. Well, so yesterday I framed it in the sermon of kind of God's plan their way.
Right.
And then I applied it saying God's plan our way. And our way is oftentimes culturally accepted practices and sins. So in other words, we look at this and it feels so foreign to us, to a woman actually allowing another woman to sleep with her husband.
Right.
And we're like, yeah, that's weird. But they would look at what we do and say that's weird.
Yeah.
So it's culturally accepted. So yesterday I did a few applications. I talked about how on the church level, God's plan is for us to reach the lost, but he gives us, God's way is clear in Scripture. And I would argue the pattern of the New Testament is we gather together for worship and edification, and we scatter for mission. And I talked about how what we see in the American church is the rise of the attractional model, which is the goal to make it as shallow as possible, consumer friendly, in order to get people in on that. And then also talked about how we oftentimes manipulate people in our evangelism strategies. Instead of God's plan is you just tell them and he'll grow that seed. And God, the Spirit of God is the one who changes hearts. Yeah. And then on the individual level, I talked about storing up treasure in heaven. So God's plan is that we'll one day be filthy rich, but that'll be in paradise. And so now we're commanded to store up treasure in heaven. And then I talked about what I guess, for lack of a better term, political involvement. and how God will one day give us rule over the nations. But we're going to be very careful that we're not adopting sinful practices now to try to rule over one nation.
Yeah.
Or control one nation. Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't know. I don't know if you can think of others, but I would say the difficulty of identifying them is because they're usually always associated with cultural idols, which are our biggest blind spots.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I talked to you last week over at just sitting there in the sermon. We've had, for Ellie and I, some big life changes, having a new kid, and like there's lots of distractions. And just sitting there in the sermon and realizing, and not, I guess, realizing based off the sermon, but just like, oh, this isn't the end. Like, this is not all there. Like, we have new heaven. We have heaven to look forward to, and then new heavens and new earth. And just kind of hits when you're actually surrounded. I think that's the importance then of that actually being plugged in and daily, well, obviously in your own walk in Scripture, but then being a part of the church and seeing, hey, you need something to pull you out of your own head.
Yeah,
from just so focused on, and it's a good thing. Like, it's a new baby. It's a great thing to be focused on.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it pulled my attention away and just had to sit there and realize, again, this is what we have to look forward to. And yeah, I think it's just that. I think that's the importance then of being plugged in and actually not just having that attractional model of come in and leave.
Yeah.
And get right back into being plugged into the world.
That's good.
So
yeah,
it's fun.
Yeah, and the overflow of worship, so that we're not just worshiping when we come into Sunday too, because the way that we protect ourselves from idols is to always worship Christ above all else.
Yeah.
Every moment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Protects us from cultural blind spots.
Yep.
But we still have them because it's really hard to.
Or inundated.
It's a blind spot. Yeah, that's the reason why.
Surrounded by it. Okay.
It's also a good reason why it's really good to read older Christian author, like from a different time period, a Christian author, because you see what they're doing, and you can it exposes some of your cultural biases and blind spots that you might have that you don't realize. So.
Yeah, that's good. When you read, and like reading the Puritans of, you read things of what they what looked at as a struggle, like, oh, that's like the things that they saw, and it just it's very convicting. It's good.
That's a good recommendation. Read the Puritans.
Okay, so jumping back into the text.
Okay,
verse 1 to start. So she had a female Egyptian servant, and later on it's repeated again. She took, or let's see, Sarah took, Abraham's wife took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, gave it to Abraham, her husband, as a wife. So we're getting the picture of kind of Hagar's history, and we'll see a little bit more of her characteristics throughout this. Are we reading the account of Hagar as, is she a victim? Is she villain? Mixture of both?
Yeah.
How do we look at this story? And we talked about like the abuse side yesterday of like,
that's right.
Not, we don't want to excuse anything, or
that's right.
But how do we look at her?
Yeah, I think I read this story as Hagar so neither character is perfect. Nobody's perfect in Scripture, but Hagar, I think, in this passage is portrayed. I would say we might use a word that Judah uses later in Genesis as maybe more righteous than Sarah in this passage. But Hagar. So we might say this way. Here's the steps. Sarah gives Hagar to her husband.
Right.
Wrong move number 1.
Yep.
Okay, but then Hagar looks on Sarah with contempt in verse 4.
Yeah.
That's important because that's the same word that's used in Genesis 12:3 in the Abrahamic covenant when it says, "I will bless those who curse you, and I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you."
Okay.
That the word curse there, I think even the ESV uses the language of dishonor. So in verse 3 it says, "I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse." That word dishonor is the word used here for how Hagar looked on Sarah.
Okay. Not a coincidence.
No. Yeah. So it's kind of like it started with the bad idea, but then Hagar shows contempt for Sarah. So then Sarah mistreats her and abuses her. Afflicts her is the word that is used. So I see Hagar in a positive light here. Other commentators I read see this in a similar thing. Hagar's only big kind of blemish is the contempt that she shows Sarah in verse 4, because that does seem to pull us back into the Abrahamic covenant. So therefore, we might say if she wouldn't have shown contempt, she would have been kind of without blemish.
Yeah.
But she shows it. So
Okay.
and then in chapter 21, we again see kind of a similar picture, but there Hagar and Ishmael had to leave for covenant purposes.
Yep.
And then the angel of the Lord appearing to her is huge. This is the first appearance of the angel of the Lord. There's a guy named James McEwen who says Hagar is one of the few characters in Genesis who actually have a dialogue with Yahweh.
Huh.
He goes on to say even her mistress Sarah is not afforded that privilege.
Right.
So there's
She eavesdropped on it.
That's right. So yeah, I think again, Hagar's not innocent, but in this passage, I think the focus is on Hagar because God reveals Himself to her in such a important way in this passage, and provides for her and takes care after she was afflicted. And the key word of the passage is this idea of affliction. It occurs 3 times to show what Sarah did to Hagar.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Is there anything significant about her being Hagar the Egyptian?
No, I think that's really important. If you go back, you remember in chapter 12, when, which is funny, some commentators connect Sarah's actions here in chapter 16 with Abraham's in chapter 12, where he was trying to manipulate the circumstances when he went to Egypt, and he lied about Sarah. But in 12:16, it tells us that Pharaoh treated Abraham well for Sarah's sake, and he gave him sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, and female servants.
Yeah.
So most likely Hagar became Sarah's servant from Egypt there.
Yeah.
And then the other significant thing about this passage is that word affliction,
Right.
which is afflicted, which is a key word here. Some translations might even say oppressed, is the same word used in chapter 15, verse 13, when God prophesies to Abraham that his descendants would go into a foreign land and they would be afflicted for 400 years. That's the same word. So in other words, what God promised in chapter 15 would happen to his people. In chapter 16, Sarai does to Hagar. She afflicts her. So there's a lot of play there on the Egyptian reference.
Okay. Any tie-in to that for Genesis 21?
Yes, in Genesis 21. Well, there's another tie-in here in verse 7 in chapter 16.
Yep.
When she leaves, the angel finds her on the spring on the way to Shur, and that would have been on the journey from the land of promise back to Canaan. So it appears that when she flees from Sarah, she's going back to her land.
Right.
And James McEwen argues that the reason the angel told her to go back and submit to Sarah's mistreatment was because she was pregnant, and it had been impossible for a pregnant lady to make that journey by herself.
Wow.
So anyway,
another provision.
Yeah. And then chapter 21, the Egypt is important because at the last verse we read, it tells us that Hagar took a wife for Ishmael from the land of Egypt. Yeah. So he married an Egyptian.
Yeah.
So there's lots of Egypt connections there.
Yeah. So angel of the Lord, if we're reading that and then saying he's protecting her. So why, even though she's not in the line of promise,
correct?
Why does God still bless her, kind of despite the circumstances that happened?
I think this is what we are continuing to see through Genesis, is that just associating with Abraham brings you blessing. So, like the angel promises her the same promise that Abraham received in chapter 15, that basically her offspring, or her descendants, would be so much they can't be numbered. That's what we've seen with Abraham twice now. So this is the idea that because of her connection with Abraham, there's like the blessings rub off, so to speak, on her. And we see this. We saw this with Lot. We'll actually see it with Lot again in a couple of weeks. And we kind of see that pattern all through Genesis. of being close to God, to Abraham, means you get blessed.
Okay. So we'll get into the promises to Hagar.
Okay, yeah.
But why? Like, so who is the angel of the Lord?
Yeah,
shows up.
Yeah, this is the first appearance. Yeah. And in chapter 21, I believe, 21, when God appears to her, is in verse 17 of 21, it's the angel of the Lord is called the angel of God.
Yeah.
So it's a different term used there. It would be the same angel.
Yep.
So this is classic, like, the angel of the Lord appears a bunch in the Old Testament. I think we've even touched on it before.
We have, yeah.
Yeah. But when the angel appears, at minimum, the angel is an official, like as official as you can get, representative of Yahweh.
Right.
Because the characters always refer to the angel as Yahweh.
Yeah.
So it's like you're speaking, if you speak to the angel, you're speaking to Yahweh.
Yeah.
So the soft version is it's an angel who officially represents, like God's official ambassador.
Right.
I would say most commentators are going to take a view of this as some form of manifestation of Yahweh.
Right.
So this is actually Yahweh appearing to Hagar in some way, because of the knowledge and the actual calling of the angel Yahweh. It would seem that I would lean towards that this is an appearance of Yahweh,
right. Which is the theophany.
A theophany, yes.
Okay. Now, not necessarily. So theophany versus Christophany.
Yes.
And there's a difference here. So we're saying, or are we saying this is? I mean, I say there's a difference, but
no, keep going.
Are we saying this is Christophany, theophany, or are we saying it's the same deal?
I prefer theophany.
Okay.
Some people would say when God appears in the Old Testament in human form, it's a pre-incarnate Jesus. So they would call that a Christophany, appearance of Christ.
Right.
I prefer just to leave it at theophany, and simply not try to identify which person of the Trinity we're dealing with. But so a Christophany would be a subcategory of a theophany.
Right.
On that. So I prefer theophany here.
Yeah.
I would say. Yeah, so this is pretty cool, though. The angel of the Lord, the first appearance of the angel of the Lord is to an Egyptian maidservant of Sarah.
Yeah. That is cool.
Yeah, it just, again, shows how God works. He's the God of seeing.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
So he appears and then makes a series of promises.
What
is so remarkable about those promises? Because it doesn't, if you were just to read them outside of the circumstances, you'd think you'd heard these before. Aside from verse 11, that gets a little bit more.
Oh, you're talking about verse 10, yes.
Specifically verse 10.
Yes. It's like I said, it's the same promise that Abraham was given. It's just a repeat of the promise Abraham was given.
Yeah.
But again, as we keep reading the story, we're going to see that Ishmael is not the heir, is not the line of promise, but he is still going to be multiplied.
Yeah.
So that's huge.
So from the line of promise, obviously we have the Israelites.
That's right.
So where did these offspring, so many that they couldn't be numbered, who did they become?
Yeah. So the popular view is that this is not just popular, but this is popularized in Islam, is that Ishmael is the father of the Arab nations, so therefore the Muslims. So that's why
they're connected to.
Yes, that's why Muhammad made a big deal about Islam. So that's the Islam connection to Abraham. There are some who question that historically. There is lots of just in the weeds debate over this, because you get into linguistic debates, you get into it's crazy. But we do know. So then the Arabs comes from the term that is associated with the region of Arab, which is the Arabian desert, Arabia, which today would be like Saudi Arabia and the smaller countries around it, the Arabian Peninsula. And so we do know that from Genesis 10 that there were descendants of Ham and Shem in that region.
Right.
So I think a safe answer is to say that not all Arabs are descended from Ishmael. There's multiple kind of groups. Would be a way. And interesting enough, in the Old Testament, the Ishmaelites are closely associated with the Midianites. So if you remember in Genesis 37, when Joseph's brothers selling him in slavery, the Ishmaelites come get him, but then we're told that the Midianites sold it. They're used interchangeably. And then in Judges with Gideon, in chapter 8, again, Ishmaelites and Midianites seem to be related. Like they seem to be almost interchangeable.
Yeah.
And because Midian was another descendant of Abraham from another wife.
Oh, I didn't.
So in Genesis 25, I'll see if I can find it real fast.
Yeah.
So Genesis 25, real quick. Yeah. So Abraham, in 25:1, it says, Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah, and she bore him Zimram, Jokshan, Medan, and Midian.
Yeah.
So somehow the Midianites and the Ishmaelites combined, and it's probably because both of them were like nomadic tribes that kind of, we're told that Ishmael settled in the region of Paran, which would have been a desert region between the land of Israel and Egypt.
Right.
Which makes sense if he's from Egypt.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. It's so complicated we can't answer it. But here's what I would say. Even if, regardless of what we think about Ishmael,
right,
when we're looking at this passage in this text, we don't want to read too much into it from modern kind of Islam Christian conflict.
Yeah.
Or even Jewish conflict.
Yeah.
Because we want to ask the question, what is this teaching about Hagar and Ishmael? Originally, not what we read back. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
So I tend to just leave it as like, this is Ishmael, the Ishmaelites biblically do this, and after that, you need to do like doctoral level research to figure out the genealogy because it is so thick.
Yeah.
So
okay, so there's the first promise.
Mm-hmm.
Your offspring, they can't be numbered.
That's right. Yep.
Okay, so you're pregnant, shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. We talked about this yesterday, the God who hears.
Yep.
Which is great. Go back and listen to the sermon if you want more on that, or we can get into it.
No, that's
today.
fine. Yeah, but notice, what does he listen to? Her affliction.
Yeah.
So God hears is based on not God hearing, in this passage, Ishmael, but God hearing Hagar.
Yeah.
So she names her son Ishmael. God hears.
Okay. And then she gets not quite of a nice promise. This will be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen. So then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, you are God of seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And get more into it, and it's just, it's a beautiful picture as far as what she names the place.
Yep.
Can you go again into the well? Just that name.
Say the...
Yeah, I'm not going to try.
Say it. Well, I had to say it twice yesterday when I was reading. I practiced it. So, Bir Lahai Roy.
Bir Lahai Roy.
Yeah.
Okay. And it means?
That's the well of the living one who sees.
The living one who sees.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a version of the God of seeing up in verse 4.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we get kind of the picture. She leaves. Well, she's sent away.
Uh-huh.
And then angel Lord appears, brings her back.
Tells
her to come back.
Tells her to go back.
So can we take anything from that as far as God? I mean, we often will have like seasons in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And people use that and describe it.
Yeah.
How do we see, or what do we look for God also still being, we get to be pursued?
Yep.
What does that look like?
As far as which part, how you talking about how God told her to go back?
Well, I'm saying so in our own lives.
Yeah.
Or in your life.
Yeah.
And has there been like a time in the wilderness?
Oh, I got you.
Where like I was pursued and brought back.
Got you. Yeah.
And like, how do we identify those times?
Question. I guess, yeah. Well, to me, wilderness times are easy to identify because they're the hard times of life.
Yeah.
So in our so I think the point, the really big takeaway here is it's in our wilderness times, our times of desperation, that we can experience God in a deeper level than we would when times are prosperous.
Yeah.
And I know that's not easy to hear. It's even not easy to say. But oftentimes if we pray, God, take me deeper, you're actually asking for more wilderness in your life.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like C.S. Lewis once had this quote. I'm going to butcher it, but he basically talked about how suffering is like God's megaphone to reach a deaf world. Because he says in our prosperity, we hear God as a whisper, but in
Yeah.
our suffering, we hear God with a megaphone.
Mm.
We hear him clearly.
Yeah.
And so the wilderness is where we experience the love of God, and that God actually sees us and hears us. He actually knows us in a deeper level than we do when kind of seasons of prosperity or, fruitful, abundant seasons in the promised land.
Yeah. That's good. I think it's just a good note too when you're praying for either for God, like help me know you better and draw closer to you, or you're praying for others and we talked about this in the staff meeting weeks ago when we were going through gentle and lowly, like praying for others to draw closer to God. It's like, well, buckle up, because suffering usually, you are driven to him.
Yep.
It's not just all right, we're going to get to know you better, and we're going to sit down and have this conversation. You're going to be driven to him because he's the only one who can actually help you in those.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah, I know one big exception on that. Have you heard of the book, The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence? It's kind of a famous book. But in that book, in the preface, I believe, he talks about how he seems like he's an anomaly because he didn't have lots of suffering, but he still felt really close to God. It's a great book, but anyway.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, but for most people, God takes you into the wilderness and teaches you, and you grow. So, I think, Hagar's the example there for that kind of a pattern there.
Okay.
Of God meeting us in the wilderness.
Okay. Well, jumping into chapter 21, we get another picture of this. Right. And Sarah insists that both Hagar and Ishmael be sent away. Why is this, and what's also unique about, and we talked about God telling you, hey, listen to your wife in this case. Yeah. But why does she insist this?
Yeah, well, so two things. One is we actually get some more parallels to Genesis 3 here. So the reversal of listening to the voice of your wife.
Right.
But also when Sarah tells Abraham, cast out this slave woman with her son. Yeah. That word cast out is the same word that is used in Genesis 3 when God drove out Adam and Eve from the garden. Yeah. So we get that language. But the reason your question was the reason why it's important.
Right.
Is because Sarah hits this nail on the head, so to speak, because she says, for the son, and this is in verse 10 of chapter 21, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac. Yeah. We do have some ancient Near Eastern evidence that the child of a maidservant could become the heir. And so as long as Ishmael is there's a possibility that kind of, so to speak, of a rival heir. Yeah. So that's what God tells Abraham. He says it basically in verse 12. Yeah. He says, do what Sarah tells you, for through Isaac your offspring will be named. And then he goes on to say, and I will make a nation of the slave of the son of the slave woman, because he is your offspring. Yeah. So there's that reiteration of that promise of a great nation coming out of Ishmael. Yeah. But so the reason it was important for them to be sent away was this kind of like we saw with Lot. When you move Lot out of the picture, it's clear he's not the heir. When you move Ishmael out of the picture, it's clear Isaac's going to be the heir of the promise, which is what we're going to see unfold. That's good. Through the middle part of Genesis.
Why would Abraham hesitate or not be displeased in this? Because God tells him, "Be not displeased."
Yeah, in verse 11. Yeah.
Oh yeah, well and so the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son, but God said, "Do not be displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman." What is that, like, displeased?
Yeah, so at this point, so they were 86. 86 years old. Abraham was 86 when Ishmael was born. Right. So this is chapter 20 was right after the birth of Isaac when he's 100. So Ishmael's like a young teenager, 13, 14. So imagine Abraham's been with this. Yeah, he circumcises him. We'll see that this week. So it's his son he's casting out. Yeah, and so you can see the heart of a father. I would say why is he displeased? It would be because he's sending his son packing. Yeah, for good. Probably never to see him again.
Because, have we had? So at this point, Abraham does know that the promise will be fulfilled through Isaac. Yes, Isaac.
Because this week in chapter 17,
right,
that's when God's going to make it clear that Sarah will will bear the son of promise.
Okay, so he does know Isaac is going to be fulfilling the line, or carrying it on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's still his son, and he still had all that.
That's right. So, and what's interesting in this passage is, so if you remember in chapter 16, when Hagar shows contempt, that's when Sarah begins to mistreat her. In this passage, Sarah wants to get rid of him when she sees Ishmael, quote unquote, laughing at Isaac, which that word lacking can apply mocking or even something more sinister. So again, so she sees Ishmael.
Yeah, is that rival?
Yeah, playing into that.
Okay.
So again, I don't know if I said this in my sermon, but another example of how in the Old Testament, multiple wives usually never work out well.
Yep. Yeah.
It's always disaster.
Someone in the congregation. Amen. I love it. Okay, so they get sent out.
Yep.
And we see God's provision.
Yes.
And it starts with God hears Ishmael.
Yeah. There's a cool play here, yeah.
So what kind of walk us through what happens?
Yeah, so you're in verse... Well, so first of all, it's interesting. We get in verse 17, we get the command, fear not, which is what we just saw last week with Abraham.
Yeah.
Remember, God tells Abraham, fear not, for I am your shield. Here, we get fear not. And then if you look down in verse 20, it says, God was with the boy. Yeah. So usually you get fear not, I'm with you. Here it's separated. He tells Hagar not to fear. Yeah. But then he says, for God has heard the voice of the boy where he is. So he heard the voice of the boy, which again plays into his name. So we might say this is almost fulfillment of Ishmael. God hears. Yeah. Hears. But then the cool thing is it says in verse 19, God opened her eyes. And she sees the well of water. So God's provision is he allows her to see his provision. Yeah. Which was there. It seems apparent that it was there the whole time. Yeah.
Which I like, because I feel like in our own lives, like you get through a season, you're like, I don't know how he's working. Don't see it. And you get through the season, you look back like, oh, it was right there the whole time. Like his provision was very clear. Yeah. And just looking, and that this one, you'd think, it would seem very obvious if it's a well.
That's right.
But they'd already been in the desert, water had run out. You know, you're going to be a little, probably hallucinating, and
you're going
to miss it.
Yeah. It's really real cool story of his provision.
Yeah. Okay, so what do we take away as our main message from these two passages?
Yeah, I like I always try to do. The best way to apply the scriptures is ask, what does it teach us about God? And then how do I adjust my life? Yeah. It was funny. I forget where I was this week or something, but I was thinking through this, and I was asking the right questions of the text always makes it easier to apply. And so the right question is, what does it teach about God? And so that's where we focus the sermon, the God who sees and hears. Right. And we could just scan the Bible and see example after example of how God... In these two passages, he sees and hears by giving promises for the future in chapter 16 and provision in the present in chapter 21. Yeah. And I think that transfers directly over to our lives in numerous ways. The provision of Christ, the promises for the future that he's given us. Yeah. In one sense, not in one sense, in a very real sense, he's already shown that he sees and hears us. Or to use the words of Hagar in verse 13 of chapter 16, he looks after her. He looks after us. Yeah. I like that phrase. He looks after me. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, so he's provided. So it gives us an opportunity to reflect on, like I kind of said yesterday, all the precious promises he's given us. So I think I said in my sermon, just ask God to bring to your heart the promises that you need right now the most. But then also to just reflect on the provision he's given us in Christ and in the Spirit, because he's provided everything we need.
Yeah, I think it's another importance of journaling, of looking back and seeing the ways that he has provided. And we were talking yesterday in one of the connection groups of Israel crosses the Jordan, sets up the stones, and go, why did they set up the stones? And it's just that same deal of look back and remember, because we forget.
Oh, yes.
And we're very, very prone to forgetting the ways that God has provided, but that's our setting up stones is, journal, see,
it's good.
This is what he's done for you.
That's good. It's funny you said that. A couple weeks ago, I took some time and basically read my journal entries for the last year. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing to see some of the themes that I had just completely forgot about.
Yeah.
And some of the things that when I journaled seemed like such big deals. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden I'm looking at them now, I'm just laughing. I'm like, man, God just handled that for me. He just took care of it. It wasn't a big deal. And now it's laughable. But at the time it was like a weight on my shoulders.
Yeah. The same deal for us, actually. When we started reading in Genesis and a couple of later chapters, I had prayers on the side and they were from like last January.
Okay.
And it was just over like the year, and a lot of our life changed.
Yes,
last year, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, we got answers in ways that I never would have thought and looked for, but it's just it's amazing to see his master plan.
That's it. So, that's exactly how it works. It's good. No, and he gives us a glimpse of it here in these two passages about Hagar.
Yeah. So okay, what do we have to look forward to next week?
So this week we're continuing.
This week.
Yeah, this week we're jumping into, we're going to look at 17 and the first part of 18. And it's basically the covenant. God gives a sign of the covenant through circumcision. Mm-hmm. And then we get the announcement of Isaac's birth. And this is the passage next week where we get why he's named Isaac, because both Abraham and Sarah laugh when they're told. So we get the laughter and the circumcision. So I'm entitling the sermon "Circumcision and Laughter," because those are two things that we don't put together. But this text does.
That's cool. Yeah. All right. Well, excited to jump in and see what we get into next time.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Thanks, Eli.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for listening to A Deeper Dive. We hope that our conversations have been edifying as you continue to think about the passage that we looked at this past Sunday. Our prayer is that our discussions will help you not only gain a better understanding of God's Word, but that you will also fall deeper in love with Christ, and that your life will reflect Him more and more each day as we both have these conversations and look at God's Word together on Sunday morning. We hope you will join us next time as together we take a deeper dive.